guys, Anthony and Kate here.
Hello, good evening.
Today we're going to talk to you guys about Mercury. In Greek and Roman times, the god of knowledge. But as we go back, Mercury is associated with different things. Today, but first, Kate is going to talk to us about her astral update.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about Mercury. Wow, I have studied Mercury for quite some time, but I went a little bit more deeper just to prepare for the podcast. And I know we've talked that you've got some things you discovered too that just really deepens our understanding of that planet, which is so important. But today is November 15th, 2021. 7:11 p.m. and I pulled the chart for 7:15, so we're close enough. But we have the outer planets of Uranus still in Taurus. Not much change at all. If you really want to get a good idea of these three planets that haven't moved much, you can go on to last week's podcast because it definitely gave a very thorough overview of where we're at. But Uranus is at 12 degrees in Taurus. And we know that Uranus is the planet of Aquarius, who is the humanitarian, air energy that is fixed, and the 11th house, which is other people, and the sky god. So it's sudden changes. It's the revolter, as Uranus we talked about, goes around the zodiac on its side. So hilarious. Just wanting to be different. It's a change agent, and when it's in Taurus, this is, of course, our financial dealings. This is fixed earth energy of the second house. So we've been dealing with all of the financial and the material comforts and the shifting and the changing that's taking place on very practical levels within societies across the world, I would say the globe. This is, not just happening here in the United States, it's happening everywhere. And then Neptune is in Pisces at 20 degrees, so not much movement there either. And Neptune is Pisces planet, and it's that higher octave, not octave. You corrected me last week, man. Sorry about that. It's octave, right?
Don't worry about it, yeah.
Octave of the moon. And we talked about that in depth, about the moon and Neptune and, getting out of the emotional system more up into the higher understanding of Neptune, which is the spiritual planet, and wanting us to rise above the five senses. It's the 12th house. Pisces rules the 12th house. It's mutable water, so it's flowing, and it's able to take a different shape. It's not stuck and stagnant. So this is where we've been questioning a lot of establishments, spiritual establishments, religious establishments, and it's saying, hey, I really need you to question orthodox views. If they make sense to you, great, but if they don't, make sure that you look at not doing nothing, but and just saying, well, I can't find anything that really fits that hole or that spiritual part. And Neptune's encouraging you to know, never forget spirit, because it's not just the five senses, right? It's not just this 3D Earth world that we need to be concerned about. So then we have collectively Pluto in Capricorn, which that's the big one. We've seen so much go on with that planet and that sign. But Pluto is going to continue to destroy and replace structures that have outlived time and usefulness, and transforming businesses and economic systems, political parties, methods of government, methods of exchange. And it is radical, and we're seeing this. And with Uranus also, the outer, longer moving planet, being in Taurus, having to do with money and security, this is definitely a new changes coming in that are pretty revolutionary in nature. So The shorter planets, of course, move a lot quicker, and I'm not addressing those unless I do like a new moon or a full moon video. And I do want to talk about the full moon that's coming up briefly, but I'll do that later. I'll kind of end with that maybe and tag on that because it'll bring us into when that's occurring, which is the 19th. But we are currently enjoying a moon in Aries at 15 degrees, and we're in what's called a waxing gibbous moon. And do you know what a waxing gibbous moon is?
It's a half moon heading towards the new moon.
Half moon heading towards the full moon.
Shit.
That's okay. We're going towards the full moon in Taurus, so it's that first quarter, right past the first quarter moon. That is like, okay, we're starting to move towards a full moon, and then we'll go into waning gibbons in the third quarter, and the waning crescent, and then the new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter. So we just go through, the moon goes through this pattern we know every 28 days. So with it being in Aries tonight, we talked about this a little today, but Aries is cardinal fire and runs the first house and is very direct and can be forceful in its expression. And so emotional situations, Aries wants to find a solution for and move out in it, and doesn't really want to deal with a moon like that and take second place. You understand what I'm saying? So he's gonna really try to understand how we can control and dominate his environment. So this could have been, we had some impulsiveness today. There was a shooting in Colorado. No one was reported injured, but there was a shooting there. And so that's where you're going to see some of that as well. This is impulsive.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said we're enjoying a moon in Aries. Who's enjoying this moon in Aries? I'm not enjoying this moon in Aries.
Well, see, I'm a cardinal sign. So again, here we go. You have to look at the whole person in their chart, right? Maybe you're not, but I have no problem with an Aries moon. I have no problem with it. It doesn't, I know how to harness it because my ascendant is Scorpio. Well, let me tie you in here. Aries planet is Mars in the Western world. Esoterically, it's Mercury, by the way. We'll get to that later, but let's stay in the Western sense here. So Aries represents Mars, who runs the first house. Well, I have a Scorpio ascendant, and Mars is my chart ruler along with Pluto. So Mars is actually a good planet for me to express myself through. So yeah, it took me a while to say that. I mean, that's like 20 years of learning how to manage my Mars right there. Sounded easy, but it's been a journey. And so I can identify with that. Forward moving, but it can get you into trouble, which somebody went off and started shooting people up today, the
rashness of the emotions, moon and Aries.
Right, exactly. And it's in what's called a quincux, which is a very challenging aspect to Mercury. And it's the mind being really quick and acute, and it can comprehend things, but it's not really consistent or well ordered. The moon and Mercury can be challenged. Can be challenged that way, and Mercury's more rational.
They're both so fast, so fluid. There's no structure there. It's like the Prince of Swords. That's what it reminds me of.
That's interesting. That's a great analogy. Yeah, we talk about the Prince of Swords for a minute. Go ahead and bring that in, because that is, I see that. I know what you're talking about.
Well, the Prince of Swords is the heir of air. These princes represent air, and swords also represent air. And in the deck that I use, the Thoth deck, the Prince of Swords isn't going anywhere. It's that he only moves in any given direction by pure chance, because because the air of air, it's so fluid. I mean, think about air. When you breathe, like air all around you moves. There's no stability to it, no structure. So it's the airiest part of the air. And when you have, you know, Mercury, which is very airy or earthy, as we'll get into, and the moon, which is also water. Water is also a fluid, and also happens to be emotional and wishy-washy, and that just reminded me of Prince of Swords, because it's such a over fluid energy, too much fluidity.
So are you equating the Prince of Swords to the Page of Swords, or the Prince of Swords to the Knight of Swords?
In the Thoth deck, the prince is air, so I guess in other decks that would be the Page.
Right,
and
all
in the
pages
Thoth deck, the Knight takes the place of the King. The Knight is fire, and there is no King.
Oh, that's interesting.
And yeah, it's good to clarify that, because most people are
Yeah.
probably wondering what I was talking about.
That's right, because in traditional esoteric tarot, if you're just going,
yeah, I forget that sometimes, so I went straight to Thoth.
Right, it's in Earth. All pages are air, but it's in, excuse me, are Earth, but it is air in swords.
Yes.
So, and pages are youthful, right? They're associated with children and the element of Earth, so they signify the arrival of messages. So, you've got Mercury really at work here behind the scenes in all of this, very, very, very strongly, because air in Gemini represents air, and her planet is Mercury, is wants to communicate the intellect and wants to get it out. And so Mercury's wanting to move forward and be very practical, and it can't, because the moon's not very practical.
Right.
The moon's ethereal.
So it ends up going nowhere.
Yeah, and
just like the Prince of Swords.
Yeah, very uneasiness. But you're highly perceptive. You've got the intellect helping the moon see things. The moon's friendly. So, what else do I want to say about the moon? And then we'll get into Mercury. Talked about it being a first quarter moon. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. The moon is tucked tonight between Chiron and it's called Orpheus, and it's an asteroid. And I do want to talk about that a minute, because I found this fascinating. Have you ever heard of Orpheus? Orpheus?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Okay, I had to look it up on the internet to find out what was going on with it. But Orpheus is a in Greek mythology, and was a musician, a poet, and a prophet. And his parents were the king of Thrace, Orgus, and the muse Calliope, Calliope. Not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but he was considered the best musician and poet of all. And he perfected the lyre, and it was the god Apollo who taught Orpheus how to play the lyre when he was an adolescent. And according to his source, his music had the ability to charm animals and make the trees dance. So he ends up dying, and so there's this, I'm not going to go into it all, but there's this sadness associated to Orpheus that has to do with these sad songs that Orpheus represents. And when you see it in a natal chart, it's sad, sweet, or haunting music, lyrics of poetry, dirges, sense of mourning and loss, grief. And I found that interesting. It has to do with death. There was a shooting today, and it very well could have been death. We don't know. Thank God nobody died, but it definitely shows just a sadness in the air and a mourning of loss and grief. So it's kind of like, too, collectively, you got to think of how this works. Like, next to the moon, it's just like emotional. It's like, man, we keep having these things happen, and it's just causing a collective sighing and a grieving and over the loss, causing people to basically sing their sad songs.
That makes sense. I've actually had a sad song that's been stuck in my head for no fucking reason.
All day.
Well, yesterday.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I don't want to get all dramatic about it because I don't stay there, but there's been moments going up to this full moon in Taurus that I have just, I don't know why, just been grieved and saddened and just had to weep. And it's not like I'm personally sad or anything huge
Yeah, I felt
is
that
happening.
today. Right.
It's just like, I think those that are attached to the moon, like the way we are, tend to feel these moons a little bit more acutely. And empathic people and psychic people, where you have these water elements causing the energies to come in clear down the channel, so to speak. But Chiron has been in Aries, and we talked about that as well. So I'm not going to reiterate Chiron, but it is the wounded healer. It's where our wounds are. It's the place that we have shadow work to be done, and we need release and forgiveness. And with it up, it's been in Aries forever. But with it up next to the moon like that. Now, none of these are tight conjunctions, so that could be why nobody died. It's really interesting because if they were tighter, that might have happened. But also, it wasn't exactly opposite Mars, but Mars is opposite the chart. So whenever Mars is opposite the moon like that, you see aggression. You can see emotional aggression. It's just the way it shows up. But Chiron is trying to heal itself, and it has to do with a lot of self-worth because Aries is the first house, and it's the house of self. And so it's the wounds that occur there, when we become born, and so it's things that occur when we're younger, and it's just wanting to be addressed with this moon in an emotional way. And it's again this forward momentum energy because it's in Aries. So it's asking you to, go ahead and do the work that you need to do. Take the time to do the work that you need to do with it opposite the sun like this, almost opposite the sun. But on the other side, the sun is in the 6th right now, and this is the 11th house where the moon is sitting. So, but yeah, with that, Mercury, let's just say this, and I'll hand it over to you. Mercury is at 11 degrees in Scorpio. This is a potent place. 16 degrees in Scorpio, and Mars is in 11 degrees Scorpio, and the Sun is in 23 degrees Scorpio. So we've got the inner personality planets all connected together, and they're not in tight conjunctions. They've got 5 degrees, 6 degrees apart from each other, which means they have some room to breathe. But Mars is pointing right at, in the 5th house, right at Mercury. And Mercury's in the 6th house, which is Virgo's home. So we'll get into that deeper, but I just wanted to mention where Mercury was tonight in Scorpio. And it's perfect because it's the ability to have profound thinking and be very keenly instinctive and a way to see things accurately, because Scorpio goes down, down deep, remember? And it doesn't mince its words here because it wants the truth to come out, and it wants to bring regeneration, and it wants to bring a deeper understanding. So it's a great day for investigative and research work as well, which is what we've been doing, right? So, but it can be secretive, right, suspicious, and
it's a pretty good fit. Pretty good fit for Mercury.
It is. Okay, so that's pretty much all I got for the intro there on our astral sky. Hand it over to you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we'll start this time instead of at the end. We'll do the Kabbalah in the beginning.
Yay.
On the Tree of Life, Mercury is attributed to HOD, the eighth sphere. Its image is a hermaphrodite. Its virtue is truthfulness. Its vice is falsehood, dishonesty. And the Esoteric text is the following. The eighth path is called the absolute or perfect intelligence because it is the mean of the primordial, which has no root by which it can cleave or rest, save in the hidden places of Kadula, which is another word for Chesed, its less common name, from which emanates its proper essence. So at the end, that last part is a clue to why its image is hermaphrodite. So Chesed is the more common name for Gedula, and Chesed is the fourth sphere on the Tree of Life. And this is on the right side of the tree, which is considered the masculine pillar, and the left side is considered the feminine pillar. But these are really not great categorizations, because if you look at the feminine pillar, at the top is Saturn, and in the middle is Mars, and then below that is Mercury. And if you look at the masculine pillar, you have Venus at the very bottom. So it's a little more complicated than that. The Kabbalah is asking us to think on deeper levels. But so Mercury is on the eighth sphere on the feminine side of the tree, but it's saying it's emanating its proper essence. Basically, it's coming from Chesed, which is Jupiter, the masculine side of the tree. So right away, there's a hint to it being hermaphrodite, but actually, there's a little bit more, which we'll get to later. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have in my notes, it's considered a bi-gendered, dual-gendered planet and a youthful Mercury planet. So and the reason that is it's in that space in between. There's no root. It's that place. It's the bridge. He's the messenger of the gods, right? So it's the message coming down from the gods to mankind through Mercury. So it's the place, just the bridge is the best way to look at it. And so there is no root. He's not going to have a root, and he's not going to have a gender. And he is that place where the male and the female come together in the intellect and move out. So I don't know if that really fits into the Kabbalah, but definitely the no gender or bi-gender,
Yep, and that's interesting. And there is another reason actually, but that kind of fits in with what I have saved for the last part, so we'll get back to it. So I'll just continue on with a little more about HOD, because those are just basically its symbols. So HOD is if you've ever seen South Park, there's a few episodes on Imagination Land. That is HOD. Everything ever thought of, thought forms exist in a dimension that has been called HOD. That is what we're talking about. So everything that has ever been thought of is in a thought form in HOD. It is astral form as opposed to astral force, which is its opposing sphere on the pillar. Because whenever you talk about spheres on the tree that are in that polarity where it has a sphere directly opposing it on the other pillar, it's kind of hard to talk about one without talking about the other. And this is, well, if we think of HOD as astral form or thought form, this also kind of explains why it's on the feminine side of the tree, because feminine is form and masculine is force. So if we have astral form, astral force is Venus, basically. It's the energy. And the idea is once you have a thought form and you give it energy, the essential life energy, whether if you're paying attention to that idea or if you're doing something in ritual, whether you're making a sigil about it or if you're calling this idea a god and devoting prayers or giving offerings to it, that creates, that ensouls this astral form, the HOD, with the astral force, the opposing sphere, Netzach, Venus, and it brings it into the astral world, which is Yesod, the moon, which we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing these things in the physical world, Malkuth, by physically making the sigil, by physically, giving offerings, in the form of physical things, saying things out loud, vibrating certain vibrations, names, we're bringing it into Malkuth. So this essentially means we can bring any of our ideas to life. All the gods are real. All the goddesses are real. Slender Man's real. I mean, that's why those kids thought they saw Slender Man in real life, because they fucking did. Someone created the thought form. The idea got so popular, so many people were paying attention to it, being afraid of it. Eventually, it came out manifested in the physical world.
There's really something to that, and that's just been lost, and it's not taught. You wonder why we don't know some of this stuff. It's just not common knowledge. It used to be, though. There didn't used to be this separateness the way that we have it now. Like we have to look through a veil almost. But that's really interesting. And it's like collective energies, right? Can literally shift a team from a loss to a win. It's been proven.
Right.
There's power in it. There's power in mass thought. And if there wasn't, they meaning those that wish to manipulate human beings for profit and a dollar sign, wouldn't do marketing the way they do. They know it works. Right?
They know the power of, what you're giving your attention to, what you're giving your emotion to. I mean, they're well aware of that. I mean, that's why the news is always negative, and that's why you can find corporate logos are basically magical sigils.
That's right.
Like, they know these things.
They do know these things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're on the same page with that.
So what I actually forgot I realized that we forgot last time was we mentioned the moon card, but we didn't mention what card the moon is actually attributed to. Because the moon card, I believe, in my deck is Pisces is attributed to. I think you said it was something else in most other decks.
No, we did talk about that. I attributed it to Pisces because I talked about it being the upper octave of Neptune, and that I said they knew. They realized that that's why they gave it to Pisces and not Cancer.
But we didn't talk about what card is the moon is actually attributed to, which is the High Priestess.
This is correct. Number 2. Yes.
And actually, this is kind of involved with Mercury, because if you look at the paths on the Tree of Life, you have the path 0, at least this is the way the Golden Dawn and Crowley attributes it. You might find some different, attribution somewhere else. So you have 0, the Fool, going straight down from Kether to Tiphereth, 1 to 6. And then you have the Mage, which is attributed to Mercury, going from Kether to Chakma, which is, or Chakma, you're not supposed to say it, whatever, from Kether, which is 0 to Chakma, or 1 to Chakma, which is 2, and then you have the Moon, the Empress, going from Kether, again, which is the oneness, basically, going to Binah, which is the divine feminine. So basically you have the feminine path to the divine, and you have the masculine path to the divine, represented by the moon, the empress, not the empress, the moon, the high priestess, and the mage, which is attributed to Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because the mage path connects Kether and Chakma is also, it's mostly masculine, but it is hermaphroditic. Like if you look at the Baphomet is attributed to Chakma, and also if you look at Pan, they're mostly masculine, but the way the tree originally formed from 1 to 2 to 3, when you go from 1 to 2, it's masculine because it's like the first penetration into reality. It's the first, wild, movement. But it's also feminine because it hasn't split off into the feminine yet, right? You only have 1 and 2. You don't have the third, the sphere of the feminine yet. So the feminine and the masculine are still combined in Chakma, whose magical image is the phallus, basically the penis, the obelisk, as masculine as can be, but it is still hermaphroditic. And it's interesting that Mercury, the path of the mage, connects Kether to Chakma, which is also hermaphroditic. And it is also, I mentioned Pan. Pan, I see, it's not officially attributed to Chakma anywhere, but to me it makes the most sense because, he's always depicted with the big penis and being wild and all that stuff. But also, he is all, you can't quite get away from that. And in some stories, Hermes is the son of Pan, and some stories it's the other way around. And you have that connection, on the Tree of Life, that right there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what is talk for a minute for me, what is the whole history behind the Tree of Life? Why is this important? And why is it important to know the stations?
Because the idea is, just like you've heard that the tarot is a story of the fool, the fool going into reality, basically, or the fool's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So the Tree of Life is basically the journey of how the universe developed in a 10-step process from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. 3 came from 2 and 2 came from 3, but it's really still that Kether, the original energy underneath them. It's just it's a story of creation in a 10-step process. It's basically the tree is meant to be a diagram of reality, and each sphere is the next step in development of the universe. And the idea is we're all born in Malkuth, the physical world, and as we ascend higher, basically as our vibration grows, as we become enlightened, we can map our progress through these spheres, which realizations we've had, which, the idea is you get some type of, you could visit these spheres. There's some magical powers associated with these spheres. So along with being a map of the universe, it's also a map of progress of enlightenment, because the idea is to go back to the source.
Mm-hmm. And it's a concept of the archetypes too, like.
Oh yes, because all 7 planets are associated with a sphere. The second sphere, Chakma, is associated with the entire band of the zodiac, and the first sphere is, literally everything, and the 10th sphere is Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And also the 22 paths.
Right.
There are, 1 for each of the zodiac signs, 1 for each of the 7 planets, and then 3 for each of the mother letters in the Hebrew alphabet, which stand for air, fire, and water. Air, fire, and water? Air, fire, and earth? Water, air, and earth?
Well,
No,
it
I'm thinking water,
goes.
air, fire. It's not earth. It's only 3 of them. But it's just weird to call fire a mother letter. But yeah, there's a card attributed to fire. So yeah, it's fire, air, water. So yeah, so there's 22 paths connecting these spheres, and these are, ways you can climb up the tree. Each path has an experience associated with it. Each of the 22 cards of the major arcana.
It's fascinating. We have these representations throughout cultures, depending on where you live. And in antiquity, in astrology, you have the wheel. In tarot, you have the 78 cards. There's also the deck of life, or the life deck. That's the 52 card playing deck. Those also are attached esoterically to meanings, and you can read with them. Each card has its own meaning. It's quite fascinating. And then, of course,
I've heard people doing that.
The tree of life and numerology and these systems and these structures, these Saturnian, like this is the path, this is the way, this is how you get there. And no one gets out of here in the body dies. No one gets out of here taking their body with them. That whole structure, that earthen casing that we work so hard at in.
Oh, yeah. The idea is, as you get to Tippereth, the sixth sphere, the Jesus sphere, basically that's the highest sphere a human can go. And, after that, you have to leave your body like Jesus did.
Right.
No man can see the face of God and live in a human body.
Mm-hmm. Right on.
Okay, so I guess... No, that's all I had on Mercury. Do you want to continue with your Mercury stuff? Well, that's not all I had. That's all I had for this part. And then eventually get to the Egyptian part.
Yeah, I'll dive in and just talk generally about Mercury. That's all right. And then I definitely want to get in, because I have some Egyptian stuff too towards the end, but just kind of pull some things together. And so what is Mercury? Mercury is known as messenger of the gods, and it takes 88 days to go around the zodiac, thus flighty, airy, fast, short travel movements for the most part, because you're dealing with the third house, which is Gemini. Mercury runs Gemini, and the sixth house, which is Virgo. Mercury runs Virgo, and all those are underneath the chart. They're not the top part. When you start getting out into the top part, you have longer distances, and that would be the ninth house. So esoterically, though, it is assigned, they give Aries to Mercury, that was a fascinating read. But I'm going to stay here for a moment in the way that we know, for the most part, how Mercury is. And it's analytical intelligence. So
it's the intellect, and I forgot to mention that HOD is the intellect as compared to Netzach's intuition. So that gives you a clear idea of what intellect is.
That's beautiful. That's where that ties in exactly. And it's schooling and learning and exchanging and information. So this is where Mercury's interested in exchange and commerce and communicating. And this can be clients. And so you get mercantile or merchants. This is where you can get Mercury from. And Mercury is adaptable and open, and it's friendly, and it's diplomatic, and it's youthful. It's young, and the story of Mercury is it's fascinating. It's hilarious. And
might the mercantile part be why Mercury is sometimes associated with Earth? Because Mercury is very very airy. Like there's almost exactly what we would consider air to be intellectual energy, but I have seen it associated with Earth also. And it also lends to its being a hermaphrodite, because air is a masculine element and Earth is a feminine element.
And here you go. And this is perfect. This is where you have Gemini. The third house is mutable air energy, right? Gemini is interested in speaking and talking and getting information out in an intellectual way. Virgo is earth energy. And
they're both mutable.
They're both mutable. So it's funny how that all
very
ties
interesting.
together. Yeah.
Because the mutable signs are actually attributed to alchemical Mercury, which is the mediator between the feminine salt and the masculine sulfur.
Right, and it is one of the three main alchemical elements, you know, the other being sulfur and salt, right? So then it's interesting if you watch what Mercury does. You know, Mercury can gobble gold. It's fascinating. I watched some stuff on it, just on the whole element part of it in science. Nice. But Mercury is interested in breaking things down into patterns and then using these memorized patterns to match another pattern. So that's where this analytical and intellectual nature comes in. And that's where we get language, because language is obviously a series of patterns, of movements.
And that's right. Why the sword is assigned for the intellect, air, because the sword divides. To analyze is to break something down into its parts.
That's right. And it's interested in that, you know, again, that financial exchange is important to Mercury. Mercury's every day, right? Mercury's fast, quick. Mercury is zipping around and moving through the signs.
In and out of retrograde.
Right. And so Mercury really wants you to be very practical in your day-to-day. This is where we get, again, that 6th and 3rd house. This is energies that aren't ethereal, okay? They're not the moon. The sun is the soul, and the moon would be the emotional mind, or the emotional body, the mind of the emotional body, and Mercury is the intellect. So Mercury helps the moon. Mercury helps the sun, so to speak, get it more into a really practical nature. I tell you, when I was studying this, it was fascinating to me. I'm currently experiencing my Neptune going through the 4th house. And Neptune, you know, what is Neptune? It's the higher octave of the moon, and we talked about this. So it's like, man, I work from my home, and I'm home a lot, and I'm in full-time study mode for school. So it's like, with Neptune here, there's times that it's just been really challenging to get that practical side of me. Just, I know it sounds crazy, but Neptune's really, I can feel that presence and what it's trying to do. And it's trying to strengthen my Mercury, is what it's trying to do. And it's happening as a byproduct, and it's like, wow, this is crazy. It went right in line with what I was studying and what I was learning. And that, again, it's this practical energy that wants you to do something with your intellect. So it'll come up with ways for you to do that, like a really practical way, like you need to make a list kind of thing.
Making money.
Yeah, it doesn't want you to be idle, so to speak. It wants you to use your intellect and do something with it, and communicate and be a messenger and speak with other people and exchange again. And it's that place in between going out into Mars and going, well, Venus is next, but then going out into the other, so to speak.
Right. And that's why Mercury is also, you know, the psychopomp, you know, who's also, you know, the guardian of souls into the afterlife.
Interesting. Something I found out too is Mercury has to do with the skin and boundaries. Wants to set up practical boundaries for you. It does want to be secure. It does want to have its place, so to speak. So Mercury's going to help you intellectually with your moon, and because the moon can sometimes cause you not to have boundaries and can make things just too much. And so Mercury comes in and says, I want to set structure here and some boundaries. And we see this, it's common in astropsychology when we're looking at medically intuitive psychology, which is something I study, and when we're looking at the mind, and if you have your Mercury in a challenging position, you see that's where the moon gets off balance, and it can't cognize, like it can't use its intellect, and there's mental health challenges there. If it's conjunct the sun, that's another sign. And I have that in my chart. I think you have that as well.
Shows the connections between our thoughts and our emotions.
Right. And Mercury wants to put patterns together. And the moon's all emotional. So it brings some balance to the moon.
And your intuition doesn't work when your thoughts are out of control and your emotions are out of control, and right, you don't know what's your intuition, what's your overthinking.
Right, exactly. And because the sun moves and the moon moves pretty quickly, and then you have Mercury moving quickly, Venus is a little slower but still considered quicker. You've got these personality planets moving and changing these outer energies. And this is why it's important to look at the outer more than the inner, smaller ones, because the inner ones are the day-to-day that if you've looked at your chart and you know who you are and you understand yourself, you're going to be able to handle that. You're going to see it coming. You're going to sense it because you're intuitively training yourself. The outer planetary configurations, again, are more cultural shifts and things that are more out of your control because they're so far away, right? Way out there. And Mercury's close by, and he's going to help you manage the daily affairs of your life and those mundane things that you don't really want to do. He's going to be able to help you with that. So also, Mercury is really young, and we'll find that out, I guess, when we go into more of the mythology. But
I think the Fool, his element is air.
And Uranus is the planet representing the Fool.
Well, traditionally it's just air and no
planet.
What deck is Uranus in? That's interesting.
That would be Smith-Waite, Esoteric.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I thought that deck was like much older than the discovery of Uranus.
Yeah, but I think that in pulling it forward into modern symbology, they've placed Uranus to the deck. That is why I learned it attached to the Fool.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. Mercury being so young and youthful, it likes to play. And this was profound when I went into this a little deeper, and understanding that Mercury is friendly. So where you see your speech and your communication being debilitary, like critical, Virgo can be very critical. It's known for this. It's because of Mercury here in Earth. It can just kind of be biting. And this isn't the way, Mercury can walk into a room and there can be people doing things that he doesn't do and doesn't even quote unquote approve of, but he's not going to judge. He's not going to do that. He's going to be impartial. He has this ability
to
be logical and intellectual about it. He's not the moon. So you have to understand how much I can appreciate that coming from all that moon energy in my chart, right? All those Cancer signatures. Right. Oh, my God.
Like, he's really almost like Pan's son there. It's like, yeah, I've seen all this freaky shit, but, like, I'm not into it. It doesn't faze me, though.
He seeks a balanced and centered and logical, pardon me. Mercury seeks
Wait, what do you mean? You were gonna call him they?
I did. Well, it's signature because it's neither. You can't just.
Or both.
Yeah, right. Well, it is right. Exactly. But Moon is mine that Mercury has to work with. Moon is the mind that Mercury has to work with. So you look at it that way where, what is your moon in? That's what Mercury has to work with. Well, my moon is in Cancer, and Cancer's signature is the moon. So it's like, how am I going to deal with this mind? It's just, it's up there in the heavens, But he did, they did, she did, they all did. We all had a party. And I kind of closed my eyes and I saw the challenges that I used to have with Mercury. And I just want to tell you, meditation on Mercury, understanding Mercury will really help you with your Mercury. And understanding how it exhibits in your chart and the transits that will affect you. And, it really is worth doing that because Mercury wants you to be smart, right? Mercury wants you to be smart. Let's see, what else do I have on? I thought this was interesting. Mercury is your ability to apply a tediousness to a project in detail. Remember I was talking about how Neptune's in my 4th and it's just like been such a challenge? So if you have Neptune in the house of home, literally Neptune's hanging out with me. Mercury's just like, how can I deal with this? This is a higher octave than the moon, man. No, there's like a double moon going on. And that's why I've just seen this challenge. And Mercury is doing its work. Like I said, it's quite fascinating the way that works out. So I have Mercury also in the tarot. We can talk about that a little more. But why don't we get into the mythology of it and close out, kind of with the tarot. You want to do that?
Okay.
So what do you got for the mythology?
So I just pulled a couple Egyptian gods associated with Mercury because, I was thinking Hermes, which is Mercury, is always associated with Thoth. But
right.
Then I realized Thoth is associated with the moon, not with Mercury. So I'm like, what's going on here? And when you go to compare cultures like this, sometimes things are confusing but interesting at the same time. Maybe it means something, maybe it means nothing. However, one of Hermes, like I mentioned before, Hermes Mercury, one of his roles was a psychopomp because he can easily travel back and forth between the realms because he's such a fast planet, messenger of the gods, and all that. He is also a guardian of souls into the afterlife. So when I looked into Mercury in the Egyptian pantheon, it doesn't seem like there's one set god, at least that I've found, because I haven't done a deep dive into Egyptian mythology yet. It's on my list. There's too much shit on my list. This was just research out of pure curiosity that I needed to know in the moment. And so Anubis is a god of death, mummification, embalming, the afterlife. And he was known, as a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. He was shown as a protector of graves. And also I found Set, god of desert storm, disorder, violence, foreigners, who is the father of Anubis, but he also occasionally plays a positive role where there's one myth where he accompanies the midday sun Ra in his battle with Apep, the serpent of chaos. So even though Set is, disorder, he's still like, no, you can't have complete chaos. Like, he's not is kind of dark and, you know, violent, but it's not. Darkness is never quite really what it seems. So it's interesting to me to see. It's interesting to me that it seems the underworld psychopomp part was isolated from Mercury, or rather, it was combined in the Greek. And, you know, Thoth, the moon in the Egyptian pantheon, is just, you know, the god of knowledge and communication. So it's almost like he was split off. The underworld psychopomp part was, you know, Anubis had set, and, you know, the knowledge, communication, writing part is Thoth and the moon. And it's interesting because there is some airy associations between, you know, storm, the air, deserts. I mean, main problem is sandstorm, disorder, violence. I mean, think about how much almost all the sword cards in the tarot deck are negative. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah, they're a misuse of Mercury. They're a misuse of the intellect, the sword cards. They're a misuse.
Well, yeah, right. But also what I've seen is there's this one song, there's lyrics to this one song. Hell's not a place you can see, not a place you'll be found. Hell's not a place that you go when you're dead. Hell's inside your fucking head. I mean, it seems like the Egyptians agreed, you know, to have, you know, Anubis and Set, you know, these, you know, violent, disorderly gods of the underworld, you know, be attributed to Mercury. And also, to me, it also kind of seems like, you know, what does that mean if your god of knowledge is attributed to the moon versus attributed to Mercury? And, you know, these are just the questions I ask myself when I'm learning about mythology. And, you know, one answer I came up with was, you know, maybe the Egyptians are trying to say that, you know, true knowledge comes from within, like a know thyself type thing. And as a contrast, when we get into, you know, the Greek, Mercury is more, when we're thinking about the underworld, there's this thing in alchemy called vitriol, when we're just isolated into spiritual alchemy, because there's a physical part to it. But vitriol is an abbreviation of a Latin phrase, and a Latin phrase translated into English is visit the interior parts of the earth, by rectification thou shalt find the hidden stone. And remember here, this is from alchemy, which is said to be started by Hermes, who basically is Mercury. And again, we have this idea of going into the earth because, you know, he has associations with the underworld. And it's interesting because in the Thoth deck, this motto, vitriol, abbreviated like that, is on the card art. And in the art card, you can see the man and the woman from the scene in the lover's card, you know, the king and the queen, with Mercury in between them, you know, the sulfur, the mercury, and the salt. In the art card, the man and the woman became one person. It shows this figure that's half man, half woman, half black, half white, half in a king's outfit, half in a queen's outfit. And, you know, this goes back to being the hermaphrodite. You know, the idea is to rectification means the act of correcting something. This is about balancing the energies, and the art card is full of, you know, the red tincture and the white tincture, the fire and the water being combined together, the red line becoming white and the white eagle becoming red, or it might have been the other way around. I might have fucked that up. But it's all about the correcting of energies, becoming, you know, 50-50 masculine energy, feminine energy.
Well, that ties right into the tarot with the magician card being the magician, right? It's magic and mysticism is associated with the magician.
Oh, right. It's
And
the path to the divine. It's the path
right.
from Chakma to Kether, the highest, the oneness.
Well, he's able to perform his magic because they, but let's use he. He's taken Mercury, his intellect, and you see it in the cards represented. He's honed it and learned and acquired knowledge, and he's got one hand up, one hand down, as above, so below, right?
Right.
And that's Hermes. And
you see in the Lover's card, they at least in the Thoth deck, they use the same figure. You can see the mage, not from a mage card. It's in shit. Don't remember the card it's called, but it is also meant to be Hermes in this card, and you see Hermes in the Lover's card in between the Empress and the Emperor, marrying them. So, he's literally doing that in the Lover's card. He's combining masculine and feminine energies.
well, the Lover's card represents Gemini, which is air, which ties you into Mercury, so that's interesting.
Right, and vitriol in the art card, vitriol art is the result of Hermes combining the masculine and the feminine, because you see them combined in the same figure.
Yeah. Right, and it's about, think about this, it's not like magic tricks. The reason that magic comes about is because he's resourceful. The magician's resourceful. What does he have on the table? He's got cups, wands, swords, and pentacles. He's got water, fire, air, and earth. He's got all the elements with him. He's the ultimate chemical magic maker, because Mercury understands deeply all the vantage points, knows how to practically approach life. Remember, it's that practical intellect wisdom. And the goal is integration. Integration. The next card is 2, the High Priestess, and then 3. 3 is the Empress. So there's this whole transition of the way that the cards go. I think that's really, really powerful. And it's kind of like when you take your intellect and you apply it in the way that Mercury wants you to, in the rational, intellectual way, use your intellect, magic occurs, because all of a sudden you have control back of your life. And that's considered magic. That's
you have to balance it.
Right.
You have to balance the intellect with the intuition, with the other pole on the tree.
Yeah, in the Hermetic, I want to read this. The Hermetic Tarot, it says, and I quote, and it's based on the esoteric workings of the Secret Order of the Golden Dawn. So that's where this is coming from.
What did you say about the Secret Orders of the Golden Dawn? You cut out for a little bit.
Oh, sorry. The Hermetic Tarot that I'm quoting is based upon the esoteric workings of the Secret Order of the Golden Dawn.
Yes, I'm aware.
So the magician is seen as a communicator with the gods and the storer of knowledge, which he willingly dispenses, similar to Mercury, who in mythology is the winged messenger of the gods. Thus the magician, through his actions and exhibition of will, this is where we get Aries connected there to Mercury, esoterically, can bring unity between the divine, intellectual, and physical worlds. So it's interesting, you had alluded to that earlier about bringing those together. By intelligence, the idea of God is conceived, and by willpower, works of good nature are accomplished. So it's wisdom, skill, and adaptation. And I think adaptation is huge here, because a really good intellect is able to do that.
Right, Mercury is fluid.
Yes, and it's friendly. It's not, when it's debilitated, when Mercury is negative, it, emptying out, it's, lacking resources, and, you're not finding what you need around you. You're not putting your intellect to work, and there's no action. And let's talk about the trickery of Mercury. What do you know about Mercury being a trickster. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, the vice of HOD, dishonesty. The more you know than other people, the easier it is to fool other people. I mean, the more magic you know how to do, the easier it is to mess with people that you shouldn't do.
That's
it's
right.
the mage upside down.
Right. It's very good, and so it's it's a warning, right? And it brings that pan energy in, and
Right.
The mythology behind Hermes.
He is a
We
trickster
have
god.
right, and we have the lyre, the Lyre, made out of the turtle shell with the 7 strings.
Oh
Supposed
yeah.
to
And
represent the 7 chakras. How lyre is really Liar.
In the myth
Liar,
where he's
liar.
born, he steals a bunch of cattle from his brother Apollo. And he
Right.
gets away with it somehow, and he's still like a baby, and yet he's like
Right.
walking, like pulling these cows.
Right. It's ridiculous. It's the story, mythology. You guys, you should read it. We're not going to do that, but I really encourage you to, um, and the thing about these stories and this mythology, and again, archetypes, right? Like if you meditate on it and you look at these energies, it can really, just like cultural thinking on something can shift and change a nation, so can this personally in your life.
Right.
And
things that you've read, things that you heard about will just click when you're meditating. Like that's why
yeah.
I mentioned the Esoteric text, because it is hard to really understand exactly all of it's talking about. But as your knowledge of it grows, and as you meditate on it, and you think about it rationally, like these epiphanies will come.
And back to what you were talking about, pre-berber. I'm sorry, I'm slaughtering this word. Prepubescent. That's why it's neither male or female, because Mercury is young and it's in that prepubescent state of not really going out into. Thank you very much. Didn't want to come out, man. This is not going to happen. Neither male nor female, so to speak. So just to talk a little bit about Mercury's symbology and what it looks like. You've got the 2 wings and the caduceus wands, right? Caduceus wand. We'll talk about that. Caduceus. So he's the god of symbols with this as well, and takes the thoughts and places them into patterns in writing and communication. And it's Mercury is known as the holder of the secrets of alchemy, the god of alchemy. And this all ties into the whole symbolism behind. And I thought that I would read the caduceus. Is that how you say it?
Caduceus.
Caduceus. Thank you. The caduceus is a common symbol in the medical field. And it ties back. Yeah. Well, they did a cephalus, which
they only use 1 snake.
That's a cephalus, and that's actually tied as well. I'll get right into it, but let me get back to the first thing I was saying. And the significance goes way back to Hermes with the 2 snakes. Do you know the story about him coming across his two snakes being locked in combat with one another?
No,
and
I don't.
He had the staff in his hand that, was it Zeus had given it to him? No, Apollo exchanged it. He gave him a golden staff in exchange for the lyre. That happened first. Right, and so he's got this staff and he's walking along and he comes across 2 snakes and they're locked in combat, and so he separates them with his staff, thus bringing peace between them, and the 2 snakes balance and intertwine themselves, so male, female, in symmetry, surrounding the staff, and finally merging at the top. They can see eye to eye in an external sign of peace. So that's the symbolism behind. It's a symbol of power of using both sides, male and feminine, combining and rising above the conditions of duality and to balance power and negative light and darkness as its tool. And in India, that's seen as the Kundalini energy, serpent power. You're probably familiar with that.
Yep.
And then later identifying again with medicine, and cad in Latin is fall or dead, which ties back to what you were saying. And is from Zeus, which means God. We get cadaver here. Is that interesting?
Very interesting.
So again, it is a base element. Mercury with salt and sulfur. So it's one of the three main chemical elements. And in the Moses God story, this is interesting. Long story short, the people were complaining, and so God sent snakes to bite them and poison them, and yada yada. Moses went on behalf of the people, and God was like, "Okay, fine. Here's a golden rod with a snake wrapped around it, and when they look at it, they'll be healed." And that goes back to Cephalus, which is the Greek god, the deity of healing and medicine. So it's got a snake around it that he carries, and he brings in health, healing, the hospitals and medicine. So you can see this symbolism all kind of tying together with this rod and how Mercury took it further.
Nice.
But yeah, I thought the medical ties there were kind of interesting, So
I'm glad you dispelled that myth, because I would have just perpetuated it. Because that is the thing here, because the hospital has distorted the symbol they're using and it's evil. No, it's actually just a different symbol, and we're all fucking stupid.
Yeah, I mean, the symbols all kind of tie together if you go far enough back. It's quite fascinating to
it's
look
all one anyway. Fuck distinctions.
It is all
boundaries.
One. No, Mercury wants you to have Mercury. Mercury's like, no. I'm the link of the mind, baby. I'm the link of the mind.
What do you mean it's all one, though? I am you. What boundaries?
Yes, but there's parts in the whole, just like the natal chart has many parts. Yeah. If you think of the sum, get into the sum of things. The sum. So Mercury's the link of communication. So how well you can talk and communicate, that's your Mercury. And basic words: reason, agility, expressiveness, adaptability, duality, analyticalness, changeability, and active. It's active. So if you're doing the same old things, remember, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury will let you do that. He's indifferent. They don't really care. It's like, well, that's reaping and sowing, and I really want you to use your intellect and get more practical, so you can adapt and you can overcome. Because when it's positive, this is where you have brilliance. You find people that have really strong Mercuries are good scholars, and where your Mercury is in your chart, we'll say where Mercury is a focal point, and I have it in Leo, up in the 9th house, conjunct all my Cancer energy. So it's wanting me to talk about 9th house things, to intellectually, it's kind of tough with my other stuff sitting there, but it took a while, but I balanced it, and with what happened growing up. But it's brilliance, and it's strong intellect and alertness and articulateness and versatility and discrimination, preciseness, awareness again comes in strongly, like you see what needs to be done. Efficiency and dexterity, and when it's negative, this is how you know you might need to get your Mercury in balance. You've got skepticism, like a lot of skepticism to the point where it's unhealthy. Irresponsibility and verbosity. Boy, I kind of connected to verbosity. Mental instability, indecisiveness, criticalness. This is lower Virgo, the lower nature, where we can be very critical and picky diffusiveness, restlessness, that's huge, and imitativeness. So it's like you're trying to copy and mimic something, and you're not being the originator with your own intellect. Does that make sense? So, yeah, and I did want to share this from Tarot and Astrology, Enhance Your Readings with the Wisdom of the Zodiac by Corinne Kenner, and her talking about Mercury and the Magician. I thought what she had to say here was kind of cool. Now, remember, this is the Western aspect, but the Magician himself is a channel for transformation and change. He conducts cosmic energy through his body, and he uses that power to manifest his own reality. In other words, the Magician shows us that the outer world of cause and effect and the inner world of personal experience aren't so far apart. We are each a microcosm of the macrocosmic universe. So it's the closest planet to the sun, and again, it's got that short orbit of 88 days, and the speed and agility is where you get this quick thinking and, the versatility. So Mercury really wants us to move out again. I can't say this enough, just very practically, because it's that rational mind. It's a thinking mind. So yeah, that's all I got.
Me as well.
Yeah, I was going to go into it in the esoteric, but I don't think I'm going to do that because it would take a little bit longer than we got. But I want to encourage everyone to look up the esoteric side of Mercury, which attributes it to Aries and the first ray, which is the ray of the will. So, yeah. Well, next week we're on to Venus then. Is that correct?
Yes.
Venus. Lovely Venus. Venus is fun. Venus is fun. What do you have your Venus in? I don't remember.
Virgo. Not fun.
Can be debilitated there. Yes, it's challenging. Well, I have it in Cancer. Conjunct my moon. In the 8th house of Scorpio. So lots of water and lots of fixed energy. So that's good because Venus out of control can be a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, next week. Oh wait, I do need to talk about really super fast. Was the full moon coming up in Taurus? That was. Let me get this pulled up here quick. Okay, so the full moon in Taurus is a lunar eclipse Taurus, and it's occurring at 3:56 a.m. November 19th. That's New York time, so that's Eastern Standard Time. And the moon is in Taurus at 27 degrees, and it's opposite Scorpio. So it's interesting because the Taurus Uranus is in the 8th house of Scorpio, and Scorpio is in, the sun is in Taurus's house. So they're flopped. They're not in each other's regular positions where they're comfortable. They're in opposite places. So it's a very challenging full moon. And Taurus is just bringing up, again, finances, material security, emotional well-being, because Taurus ties in his sense of security with his financial security very, very, very much. And we're seeing such changing circumstances that this can really affect your emotional life. And when it's opposite the sun, that's what we see. So I am going to be doing a video on it. I like to wait till I'm closer to those energies because I like to channel those energies while I'm doing my video. But yeah, I'll have that out. And if anybody's interested, that'll be, I guess we're leaving the Facebook up. Not spending a lot of time there, but we're just leaving it up to post because some people are finding the broadcast there. So I will post it there.
All right.
But yeah, powerful, powerful full moon. Great time for releasing and trusting. Okay, well, you have a wonderful night, and we will see you on the flip side next week.
Good night.
Good night.